Good evening. This is at Wilderness Voice 71 coming back at you with another video. If you remember yesterday, we were talking about the lost house of Israel and how the Assyrians came in and conquered Israel and disbanded the Israelites. And I was showing some historical evidence that Israel probably migrated north. So today we're going to go 140 years forward into the future, or the past, from Israel forward up to Judah. 140 years later, now Judah is surrounded by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. So the king of Babylon has went through the kingdom of Judah and now has Jerusalem surrounded. But God, in his mercy, love, and grace, he appoints a prophet, Jeremiah, and to go warn Judah, basically telling them, say, hey, look, you saw what happened to Israel, and you guys had a chance, but you did worse than they did. And so now you need to surrender to the king of Babylon. If you do, you will be able to live and go, and you'll be carried away captive to Babylon, but you'll be able to live, plant, and do all those things. And the king of Judah didn't like that. So we got to look at Jeremiah's commission. Jeremiah's commission was to be prophet to the nations. And that's very important to understand because it's plural nations. It wasn't just the nation of Judah. God appointed him to be prophet over the nations. Number two, Jeremiah's commission was to root up, break down, and destroy, and then rebuild and plant. Well, in the book of Jeremiah, we see the root up, the breakdown, and the destruction. We don't see the build and replant. So anyway, let's get back to the story. So Jeremiah goes to the king of Judah, tells him this. King of Judah doesn't like it. And like anybody who has power and money, a lot of times they surround themselves with yes men. So the king of Judah has all these people around him, his false prophets and all that, telling him how they're going to beat the king of Babylon, and they're going to do these great things. And Jeremiah, everything Jeremiah says irritates the king of Judah. So eventually, after Jeremiah gets slapped around a little bit, gets thrown into a dung hole. So he takes and has Jeremiah thrown in a dung hole because he doesn't like what Jeremiah says. And it's kind of funny because sometimes when you do what the Lord leads you to do, sometimes you're going to get met with obstacles. But that's a whole nother video. We can get into that. But anyway, so Jeremiah's down in this dung hole. So lo and behold, what Jeremiah says comes to pass. Nebuchadnezzar destroys Jerusalem, comes in, takes it over. The king of Judah tries to flee, and his sons are all killed. So, what's interesting about this is that whether God willed Nebuchadnezzar's heart, something happened because Nebuchadnezzar walks by and has Jeremiah pulled out of the dung hole, and he orders Nebuzaradan, his general, the captain of his host, to take care of Jeremiah, to make sure he's okay. And so this is really interesting because Jeremiah was not wealthy. He wasn't anything. He was just a guy who said, hey, you need to surrender to Babylon. So whether King Nebuchadnezzar knew this from people standing by saying, yeah, that dude said this was going to happen, I don't really know. The scripture doesn't really say. But we do know is Nebuchadnezzar ordered him to be taken out of the hole and ordered Nebuzaradan to take care of him. So Nebuchadnezzar appoints a governor over Judea because in the scheme of Babylon, Judah was not that big. So he leaves after he appoints a governor and leaves Nebuzaradan to clean up the mess, to appoint troops and make it secure and all this good stuff. And finally, Nebuzaradan's got to go back to Babylon. So he's got Jeremiah in chains, and he unshackles him and says, hey, look, king told me to take care of you. So if you want to go back to Babylon, I'll take care of you, and I'll, give you food, whatever. Or if you want to go back to Judah, the governor there will take care of you, provide you food, whatever you need. Or he goes, or you're free. You can go wherever you want to go. So basically, Nebuzaradan releases Jeremiah to do whatever he wants. So what does Jeremiah do? Jeremiah goes back to Judah. And why? And this is where it's a little bit interesting, because when we go to Jeremiah chapter 43, verse 6, now I will tell you, I've read the King James for a long time. I've also read the ESV. I think the ESV is a really good translation because they'll incorporate a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls and Septuagint and give you the different different meanings of the different verses, different translations, and it's really cool. But in this particular verse, I think the King James gets it right. Here's why, and for a subtle reason that personally I look at. In the ESV, it says that Jeremiah stayed with the people of the land and the princesses of the land. Well, the King James Bible says that he stayed with the king's daughters. And the reason why I think this is an important point to make for me is that when the king's sons were all killed, but when we go into Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar appointed some of the princes, some of the guys of the land that were in the royal court to be advisors to him. So basically, these were the educated young men that were in the king's court in Judah. He brought them and made them advisors to him. But these were not the king's sons. So that's very different. The king's sons were killed. So when they say princesses, they could say, oh, these were like the ladies of the court or whatever. No, I think King James gets it right here because it says these were the king's daughters. And this is really important to understand the other part of Jeremiah's commission. So we see this, and we know in the rest of the story that he ends up, the group ends up fleeing down to Egypt, and they come back, and nothing much more is heard about Jeremiah. So that is what kind of the overview of the biblical text of the book of Jeremiah, and I could get more detailed about it, but for my point in this video, I just kind of give you an overview. So now we're going to leave, and like I told you, if I'm going to talk about Bible, we got Bible here. Now we're going to leave Scripture, and we're going to go back into Irish history, and this is what's really, really, really unique, I find, is that, well, one of the things it tells you in Jeremiah, getting back in Scripture, is that the root of Judah, the branch of Judah and Israel would be put back together. So a lot of people think, well, this is when Messiah comes, the lost house of Israel, because Judah always believes that even in Jews today, that Israel, that he will bring back the lost house of Israel. And that's what Mashiach was supposed to do. This is why Jesus said in Matthew 15, remember that yesterday, that he was sent to the lost house of Israel. Now this is what's interesting. So that root we put together. If we go into Irish history now, approximately 140 years after the first settlers in Ireland, who were known to be Israelites, were there and ruling in Ireland, a holy man shows up, according to Irish history, with a scribe and a Middle Eastern princess. Now, this Middle Eastern princess comes in and marries the Israelite leader's son. Now, they say this, the tribe of Dan, it could have been, but when Israel's disbanded, it was a hodgepodge. You had Ephraim, Manasseh, you had Reuben, Zebulun, you had all the different tribes, because keep in mind, they were a conquered nation. And so the tribe of Dan, remember I said they leave heaps, so their name would be known. Also, they were the seafaring ones. They're the ones who took the boat. So some of them went by land, some of them went by sea. But my point in this is that, according to Irish history, this Middle Eastern princess marries this ruler's son in Ireland. Now, well, that could be coincidence. But it's interesting, this holy man had a scribe. Jeremiah had a scribe. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Jeremiah's scribe's name was Baruch. And the scribe of this holy man, because they don't ever say, that in the history in Ireland doesn't talk about the holy man's name, they didn't know it. But this scribe's name was Baruch, or Barak, something like that. Now, you have a holy man who has a scribe who has a Semitic name in Ireland with a Middle Eastern princess who marries. Now, what makes this even more interesting, that this is a belief held by the royal family. King Charles believes this. And they have some credence to this belief. The royal families trace their lineage all the way back to this marriage. This is why the royal family asserts that they're of the Davidic line, And there's some things, because in the Bible it says that King David will have someone ruling on a throne throughout history in perpetuity. And we know that within a couple years of Judah being destroyed, we have this Middle Eastern man showing up with the king's daughter. And this is what the royal family believes. They believe they are the Davidic line, because the Irish, it goes from Ireland, Scotland, and then to UK. So it's like overturns what Scripture says, and they believe they have the right to rule. Now, some people say, well, that's apostate, and they think they're Messiah because he's head of the Church of England and all these things. I'm not really here to judge. I'm just here to give you what I know. You can make your own assumption about that. I think Queen Elizabeth was very clear. They're the governor over the Church of England. They're not the authority, and she asserted that Jesus Christ is the authority over them. And nowhere in any shape or form have I ever heard a king or queen of England say that they are Messiah. They don't, but they do say they have the Davidic line in them, and they have the right to rule. This is why their monarchy has went on like it has. So they believe that it's a divine right from God to rule, which is very interesting. So, okay, so what's that mean? Well, remember when I said that Ephraim and Manasseh, one would be a multitude of nations, would be Great Britain, and one would be the greatest nation. A great nation would arise from it, and that would be the United States. Well, is that true? Is Judah our brother more than just engrafted in the line? Because you have some of birthright of the Abrahamic line who basically, if they didn't accept Mashiach as Messiah, are cast aside. They're prodigal. And then you have the Gentiles, or anybody who's heard the word across, who's accepted Jesus Christ, who are engrafted in the Abrahamic line. So either way, it doesn't really matter, but it is interesting because this way history develops. And the reason why I'm saying it like this is that because it's all has to do with coming to Jesus Christ. And and I'm a firm believer that it doesn't matter who you are. It's interesting to watch this develop because you have so many people make these huge leaps in biblical prophecy and things. And maybe sometimes things are just a little bit simpler than we try to make them. I think a lot of times we're so caught up in conspiracy theories and all these different things. And I'm going to be doing a video about the Templar and Freemasons because I think there's a very interesting take on it that no one's really ever explored based on what I've read and know. But that's for another video. But I think sometimes people try to make more out of conspiracies than they are. Like the royal family's got this conspiracy. No, they just believe, based on their beliefs and the history that backs up what they're believing, that they have the right to rule. And it's pretty simple. But I'll give you something that's even more interesting. So in May 14th of 1948, Israel became a nation again. And they became a nation by being voted in by 2 UN Security Council members. And these 2 UN Security Council members voted them in within 8 seconds of each other. And that was the United States and Great Britain. Now, what does that mean? This could be a fulfillment of a prophecy. And I'm going to point you to Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 18. In those days, the house of Judah shall join the house of Israel, and together shall come from the north, shall come from the land of the north, and gain the inheritance that was given to them. So basically, what you had 2 nations come from the north with Judah and reclaimed Israel and made it a nation in 8 seconds. Like that, they were now a nation again. This is very interesting. This is a very interesting thing here. That these 2 nations came together and basically put Israel, Judah, back on the map. And since then, our 2 nations have supported Israel and every endeavor what they've done. Because at the end of the day, it is instinctual in us to know that that's their God-given land. That's the inheritance that our God has given us. Anyway, I hope you have a blessed evening. I think I threw this out there. Again, I think it helps build some of the things in history, just stuff I've read. Take it for what you want. Believe it or not believe it, that's okay. You can research anything I've told you. But I hope you all have a blessed day, and I'll come back at you with another video.